Assalamualaikum, brothers. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. As I think we're all aware, we all are aware of the importance of Palestine in terms of Islamic Aqidah and in terms of its dominance, shall I say, in Islam. We are all aware of the fact that Masjid al-Aqsa is central part of our deen, and we are all aware of the fact that a lot of the messengers were sent to that part of the world. But I want to put Al-Aqsa and Palestine in its right place. And in order to do this, if we look at actually what is mentioned about Palestine, especially Masjid al-Aqsa, you will find that the ahadiths and even verses from the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it directly. Now in the Quran you'll find that Allah in certain places mentions certain things by name, like Masjid al-Haram. Certain things Allah does not mention. So for example, when Allah tells us Musa alayhi salam is, struggling against Fir'aun, but He doesn't tell us which Fir'aun it is. It's just a title. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Isra actually mentions Masjid al-Aqsa when Allah says سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنري من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير. Glory be to Him, i.e. to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who took His servant Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on a night journey from the precincts of Mecca, of the holy Kaaba there, to Ilal Masjid al-Aqsa, to the furthest mosque, so He could show him of some of His signs. Indeed, Allah is the all-hearing and the all-knowing. Now, what are some of these signs? Aisha radiallahu anha narrates that the Prophet ﷺ used to recite Surah Al-Isra, this particular verse from Surah Al-Isra, every night in Salatul Isha. Every night the Prophet ﷺ mentioned Masjid al-Aqsa in his prayers. It is also mentioned in many, many places the virtues of Palestine and Al-Quds. So in one of the hadiths, one of the Sahabi asked the Prophet ﷺ, which was the first masjid built? And the Prophet ﷺ answered, it was the mosque in Mecca. When I say the mosque built, I don't mean the building and the thing, I mean the foundations. So on the ground, which was built. He said, in Mecca. Then the Sahabi asked, which was the next mosque? And he said it was Masjid al-Aqsa, and the difference between them was 40 years. This should highlight to us the love of Allah for this place. Because the first place of worship was Bakka or Mecca as it is called now. The second place of worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala built for His name to be glorified was in Masjid al-Aqsa in Palestine. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ mentions how Ash-Sham, which is modern day Syria, Jordan and Palestine put together, it is blessed. So it is narrated by Zayd ibn Thabit that the Prophet ﷺ said, how blessed is Al-Sham? The companions asked, why is that? The Messenger ﷺ replied, I see the angels of Allah spreading their wings over Ash-Shams, and the prophets lived therein. There is not a single inch in Al-Quds in Jerusalem where a prophet has not prayed or an angel not stood. So in the old city, as they call it, in Jerusalem, there is not one place that a prophet has not prayed or an angel that has not stood in that place. That's how blessed that land is. That's how central that land is to our deen. In another hadith, the process, it is mentioned by Abdullah ibn Umar, we prayed along with the Prophet ﷺ facing Al-Quds for 16 to 17 months. So the first Qiblah was Al-Quds. We prayed for 16 to 17 months of the Prophet's prophethood. Then Allah ordered us to turn His face towards the Kaaba. This is in Bukhari. We are also encouraged to visit Masjid al-Aqsa. And very few times do you find the Prophet ﷺ encouraging us to visit places. But here you find that the Prophet ﷺ mentions that we should visit Al-Aqsa. The other two places he mentions is Mecca and Medina. So in this hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah, he relates, you should not undertake a special journey to visit any other place other than the following three masjids with the expectation of getting greater reward. the sacred masjid of Mecca, the masjid of mine, i.e. the Prophet's mosque, and the masjid in Al-Aqsa. In a different riwayah of this same hadith, the Prophet ﷺ mentions, for 3 masjids, special journeys may be undertaken. The sacred mosque, i.e. the mosque in Mecca, my mosque, the Prophet's mosque, and the masjid in Jerusalem. So here again, the Prophet ﷺ is encouraging us. The reason I'm mentioning all of these hadiths is to get a grasp of Al-Aqsa and Palestine is not just another place for us. It has its central aspect in Islam. It's not just another land for us. In this particular land, many, many blessings have been related. So one of the blessings that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us in another hadith, he said, a prayer in Mecca is worth 100,000 times reward. A prayer in the Prophet's mosque is 1,000 times reward. And a prayer in Al-Aqsa is worth 500 times reward. So the prayer in the mosque of Al-Aqsa is worth 500 times more reward than the prayer in a normal masjid. As the same goes for the prayer in Medina, which is worth 1,000 times, and the prayer in Mecca is worth 100,000 times. The Prophet ﷺ didn't only bless the mosque. The Prophet ﷺ also talked about the blessings of the inhabitants of Palestine. So in one of the hadiths, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned regarding the inhabitants of the blessed land, they and their wives, i.e. the men and their wives, their children and their slaves are in ribat, i.e. guardians. Now ribat in our deen comes actually from striving and struggling in jihad. The one who is on ribat, he gets the reward day and night for standing guarding a particular post. This is the type of reward these people have in the place of Al-Aqsa and in the place of Palestine. That their living there has become a blessing for them. All in all, there is about, I found at least probably about 100, 110 hadiths just mentioning Al-Aqsa and mentioning Jerusalem, all in all. Now again, this should highlight to us the importance of this particular land. It should highlight to us the importance of this particular masjid. It is not like any other land. It is not like any other masjid. Now, what has it come to in that land? That at this moment, this particular land is occupied by the Israelis. That the people in this land are oppressed. That they have been squeezed into the Gaza Strip, which is the most densely populated area on the planet, and the West Bank. That their homes have been annexed from them. That they've been removed from their lands, that their children, their heritage, they've been all removed from them and they've been given to another people. That this oppression has lasted, I would say, for about 100 years, and I'll come to why I say 100 and not 50 years in a little while. How is it that it has come to this? How is it that this blessed land, which should be under the domain of the Muslims, is not under the domain of the Muslims, it's under the domain of a different aggressor, who's come, who's occupied this land and who has subjugated his people? What went wrong in our history that this could have happened? And the reason I said to you 100 years is because everybody knows, or most people know, that Israel was founded in 1947, in 1948. But that is not when the occupation of actually Al-Quds and Palestine started. The occupation started probably another 40 years or 30 years earlier. And I want to take you back to the date of 1917. 1917, the foreign minister of Britain, he issued the Balfour Declaration. And in it, he said, keep in mind, this is the foreign minister of Britain sitting in London talking about Palestine. He said, His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievements of this objective, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of Jewish communities in Palestine. So i.e. he said, we want to give the Jewish community a home in Palestine. Now, Palestine, the last time I checked, doesn't belong to the British. Never did. But he is deciding, sitting in London, what he wants to do with another people's land, which is almost like millions and millions of miles away in Palestine. He has a say on this issue. What happened after this? In 1920, the British government then occupied Palestine under the British mandate. The reason this was when the Ottoman state sided with the Germans, and the Germans lost the First World War. The spoils of war, which were the lands of the Ottomans, were split up, and Palestine was given to the British government. This remained for about 30 years, until about 1945, 1946. During this period, the British allowed mass migration from Europe of Jews, mass migration from Russia of Jews to Palestine. They allowed people from Europe, from Jews especially, and Jews in Russia to migrate to Palestine. This accelerated with the fact of the Second World War, and the Jews were oppressed by the Nazis, and the British and the European powers felt sorry for these people, so they said, we'll give them a home in Palestine. Keep in mind that this was a specific European problem. The Germans, the Nazis, oppressed the Jews. The British first sat and watched while this happened. Then after they got involved in the Second World War, and they won the Second World War, the British and the Allied troops, they suddenly decided that because we feel sorry for the Jews, we are going to send them to Palestine. Now, I've never heard of that in my life ever, where this is a purely European issue, and somehow you are going to give a people who have no connection to this issue, give them a stake in that particular land. That has never happened. Ever. Then in 1945, what happened? The British handed Palestine over to the UN, which was called the World League at the time. The UN then came up with the policy of the two-state solution. And I'm more than sure if anyone's been following the news, you are going to hear this word again and again and again. The two-state solution. The UN came up with that, and they said that we want a Palestinian state and we want an Israeli state side by side with each other, with East Jerusalem being the capital for the Palestinian state. This was what was decided by the UN. Who are the UN? The 5 permanent members: America, Britain, France, Russia, and I think somebody else, which is just off my mind at the moment. They're the 5 permanent members of the UN. So they decided this is what we're going to do. In 1948, when Israel was established, and then since 1948, you've had many incidents that have happened. I can't unfortunately go through all of them because of the length of the talk, but one of them I will mention is 1967, the 6 Days War, where basically the Israeli army went out, annexed lands from Jordan or Transjordan at the time, so they took the Golan Heights, annexed lands from Syria, and they added that to the already growing state, until they pushed the Muslims into Gaza on one side, and they pushed the Muslims into West Bank. The ones they could not push into these two areas, they made into refugees among many refugee camps. It is estimated, and this is a rough estimation by most accounts, that about 800,000 refugees were established that were sent to these camps. 800,000. That's 200,000 less than 100,000. 800 families, people, homes. Now, you know, all of these things at the moment are figures and facts. But let me tell you what that means on the ground in Palestine. What it means for the average person in Palestine. What it means for the Muslims living daily under occupation in Palestine. Because at the moment, all I've given you is dates and numbers and a history lesson. On the ground, what does it mean? It means that when you're at a checkpoint, a Muslim woman is at a checkpoint and she's delivering a baby and she needs to get to the hospital. The Israeli guards know you can't go. She has to deliver that child at that checkpoint in front of everybody with no assistance from medical attention at all. No medical assistance whatsoever. That's what it means on the ground. It means that when children are trying to go to school and they're at these particular checkpoints, they have to get searched as if they're going to be carrying weapons and bombs and all sorts of nonsense. That's what it means on the ground. It means that when an Israeli soldier breaks into your home during the middle of the night, it can arrest any male member of your family, take them to prison and leave them in prison for as long as they please until they wish to give them a trial. That's what it means on the ground, on a daily basis. That you have to live like that in humiliation. That's not even me mentioning to you the massacres. That's just daily life. Then you've had the massacres throughout those times. The most probably brutal being in 1982 of Shabra and Shatila. I don't know if anybody knows about that. But what happened then? Well, in a Palestinian refugee camps, the Israeli army allowed what they would call mercenaries into this particular camp, and they massacred the Muslims in this particular camp because they wanted to return back to Palestine. The killing was so brutal that the mass graves were so brutal that they're not even sure of the numbers. There's something like they said between 8,000 and 50,000 you could have killed in that period. They're not sure of the numbers. That's how brutal the massacring was. That they went in. There was one particular clip I was watching where when these mercenaries were in there killing the Muslims, one of them, he's talking to this conversation was recorded. He's talking to an Israeli guard and he's telling them, I have 50 women and young children here. What should I do with them? And then the Israeli guard responds with, you know what to do. And then the mercenary responds with laughter, starts laughing. Now you know what happened. I don't need to tell you the rest there. You know what they did there. It was out and out rape. This is the type of torture that these people go through. That's one example. Then you've seen the Gaza war about 2 years ago. You've seen the flotillas about a year ago, where they went in and they basically, especially in the Gaza war, they went in and they did not respect any UN law or anything like that. They went and they just shelled the whole place. This is what it means on a daily basis in the ground. There's two examples I actually want to give you, because those two examples, even as a young boy, stuck with me. There was one example, it was I think about 96, where this man, there was fighting between the Palestinian resistance and Israeli soldiers. This man and his child got caught in the middle of that. I don't know if anyone saw the pictures, because later on they became famous. And he was trying to protect his son with his own body, pushed into a corner. He was pushed into a corner. He's got his body all over his son, trying to protect his son from being shot. And there is the next clip you find is that his son's been shot, but he's perfectly fine. The Israeli sniper shot down his son, but left him alive. Now, anybody who's a father in here, you will know the pain of when just your child dies from natural causes. Imagine when your child is killed, what it breeds in you, what it does to you. That was one example. Another example, actually, which I remembered, which was I think about 2002, where this young girl, she's passing the Israeli checkpoint, and she's going to a UN school, and she's wearing the UN school uniform. And the Israeli soldier on the tower, he's a sniper, he sees her, and the transcript is recorded between them. And one of them says, oh, I can see is a Palestinian girl going to a UN school. And the other guy, doesn't matter, she could be carrying a weapon in her bag, shoot her. So he snipers her down. With one shot, he kills her. She's on the floor, he then takes a submachine gun and unloads the whole round into her body. So her body is completely bullet-ridden. That's what the occupation means on the ground. That's what it does on the ground. Those are real people with real families and real faces, not figures and numbers and stats. Now, what you will find is, what is the solution to this horrific crime being proposed? What is being articulated by whoever to solve this particular problem? The problem at hand is that you've had in Palestine the PLO, which was under Yasser Arafat, Fatah under Yasser Arafat, now moved to Mahmoud Abbas. They have proposed with the Americans and the British and the Europeans and everybody else the two-state solution. What is the two-state solution? This is the question. The two-state solution is two states side by side with each other. But there's a caveat. Israel has all the power. How? They will decide how much goes into this particular, i.e. the Palestinian state, in terms of taxes and revenues. If you read the UN resolution, they decide. The Palestinians cannot have a militarized army. So they can't have an army, they can have a police force. They don't have to have an army. The Palestinians, if they wish to make treaties with any other nation, need the assurances of the Israelis. This is what's being pushed. And then East Jerusalem as the border. This is what is even being pushed, unfortunately, by the PLO or Mahmoud Abbas at this particular moment. He's even pushing this. Why is this such a problem? This is because, and keep in mind, they want to take the two-state solution to the 1967 borders. So basically all the lands that Israel annexed during the 1967 borders, they want Israel to go back to their 1947 or 48 borders, not to 67 borders. So I give back some of the land and you can remain. Now, this is an occupation. If I came into your own house, and let's say your house was 3 floors, I came in and I took your house over, I forced your family to follow my rules, to follow what I had to say, and then I said to you, let us negotiate. I will take 2 floors, you can have 1 floor. Or I even said to you, I will take 1 floor and you can have 2 floors. Put your hands up if you would accept that. Or would you say, no, I will not take anything from you, I want you out of my house. Put your hands up if you would accept that. That's what they're asking of us to do in Palestine. That Israel has come in, it has massacred your people, now let's negotiate after the killing. Let's negotiate after the torture. Let's negotiate after the mass murder. Let's negotiate after the massacres. We want to negotiate with you. No reasonable, I haven't even said to you the Islamic stance on this. This is just a rational point. No sane human being on this planet would accept that. You must be joking, you think I'm stupid. Of course I'm not going to accept that. How can you do that? You've come in, you've occupied my land, and now you want me to say, let's be best friends. Let's be friends, let's be neighbours. It's not going to happen. But that's the proposal that is being put forward. Indirectly, there's another card which the Americans and the British and the UN is playing. And you'll find that throughout its theme when they talk about Palestine, this is a Palestinian issue. This is an Arab issue. Now, from what I can see in the crowd, we're not Arabs and we're not Palestinians in this crowd. But they've tried to regulate this to, it's a Palestinian issue. Let the Palestinians deal with it. It's an Arab issue. Let the Arab organizations or the Arab rulers deal with it. But is this an Arab or a Palestinian issue? What does the Prophet ﷺ tell us? The Prophet said, the Muslim is a unique ummah among the whole of mankind. Their land is one. Their war is one. Their peace is one. Their honor is one. Their trust is one. I.e., this is not a Palestinian, and we should not view this as a Palestinian or an Arab issue. This is an Islamic issue. And each and every one of you in this room have a right to that particular land. Because by virtue of the fact that you are Muslim, by virtue of the fact that the Prophet has told us that you are one ummah, that land belongs to the ummah of Muhammad. That's who this land belongs to. Keep in mind how we won this particular land. It was the Sahabas who sacrificed to open this particular land up under the reign of Umar ibn al-Khattab. He wasn't a Palestinian. No such thing, no such term at that particular time didn't exist in the vocabulary. He was a Muslim who went to take the deen of Allah to that particular land. That's the issue, that this is an Islamic issue. The other thing to keep in mind is, look at the hypocrisy of these Americans and the British. They say to us, this is a Palestinian issue, but they have a say on this issue. They say to us, this is a British issue, the British tell us that this is a Palestinian issue, but they have a say in this issue. The French will tell you this is a Palestinian issue, but they have a say in this issue. Everybody else in the world has a say in this issue, apart from us. And we are the rightful owners of that land. Everybody else in the world has a say in that issue of the issue of Palestine. But for some reason, we are not allowed to articulate our solutions. Our Islam is not allowed to articulate its solution, even though its land, and by virtue of the fact that it's called Masjid al-Aqsa, it's not a church or a thingy, it's Masjid al-Aqsa, we can't articulate our issues. We can't articulate our solutions. But they want to say, and America is on one side of the planet, and Palestine is on one side of the planet. But they still want to say in our land, in this particular land of ours. So how dare they tell us that, don't worry, this is not an issue for you Bengali Muslims, this is an issue for these Palestinians. How dare they say that to us? And even more so, we should never accept that. We should say, actually no, this is our issue, this is why it's our issue, and we have a solution for this particular land. Secondly, the two-state solution is not even a solution. The two-state solution is a compromise between the Israeli aggressor against the oppressed Muslims of Palestine. That's what the two-state solution is. It's a compromise. It's a compromise between the one who wishes to dominate that land against the one against who's being oppressed. The Prophet ﷺ tells us in a famous hadith, which you will find in Abu Dawood, you would find in both the actual Sahih books, Bukhari and Muslim, you will find in Tirmidhi, where he says, giving away a handspan of Muslim land is preserving a handspan of the hellfire. Giving away a handspan of Muslim land is preserving a handspan in the hellfire. The two-state solution gives away almost all of it. So even a handspan, it's almost all of it. You get 2 pieces from it. That's all you get, 2 pieces of the cake. And in reality, you're not even in power. Thirdly, you should ask yourself, why is Mahmoud Abbas going to the UN? Why is Mahmoud Abbas going to the one who started the problem in the first place? Going to the one who allowed, said to the Israelis or to the Zionist movement, you can have a homeland in Palestine. It's okay, it's not a problem. He's going there and asking for justice. Going there and saying that, please resolve my problem. It's like almost going to the thief and begging him for your product, for your items back. Going to the criminal and saying, can you please give me justice? He oppresses you, he kills you, he massacres you, and then you say, yeah, I expect a lot of justice from you. You're going to be just to me. On top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَلَن يَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ سَبِيلًا. And never will Allah allow the disbelievers to have a way over the believers. Almost all of the Mufassirin say here the word sabil means actually power. Never will Allah allow. And look at the way Allah puts this. Walay, walan. Yeah, the particle, because of tajweed rule, it becomes walay, but walan, never. It will never ever happen that Allah will allow the disbelievers to have power over the believers. Why does Allah say it like that? Because at this moment they do have power over us. This is to show the emphatic way that this is not allowed. This is haram. It's not allowed in any shape or form to allow the non-Muslims to come to our issues and dictate to us what the solution to our problems are. Whatever the issue actually may be. In this particular case, it's Palestine. But here, you've got the leader of the PLO going to the United Nations and asking, like I said, for justice. Asking for a resolution. You can help me. Proposing a UN resolution as if he's going to get some sort of justice. You think the UN refer to Allah and their messenger? You think they care what Allah and their messenger has to say? Is that the way the UN operates? Or does it operate on what Britain's interests are? What American interests are? What French interests are? What can we get from that particular region? What is good for our national interest? Don't even care about Israel. What is care about our national interest? This is what their goals are. And yet we still go and go to their forums to play their games, thinking that somehow we will be successful, thinking that somehow we will gain some sort of justice from these people. How deluded must we be? You should ask, how deluded must we be? The issue of Palestine, for us, we cannot compromise on. This is a red line issue, what I would call a red line issue. In our deen, there are certain things which are red line. You cannot compromise on, for example, the drinking of alcohol. It's haram, qata'an. Nobody says it's halal. It's haram, qata'an. It's not allowed. Nobody in their right minds will go and say, well, drinking khamar, fair enough. Okay, let's allow it. You wouldn't. For example, praying the 5 daily prayers. Let's not pray 5 times. Let's pray twice a day. Qata'an. Anybody said that, you go, what are you talking about? Palestine is one of those issues for us. It is a non-compromising situation for us. We cannot compromise on this issue, and we should articulate it like that. That we cannot compromise on this issue. That Allah and His Messenger did not allow for us to compromise on this issue. So the question to ask is, well, it's all good and well saying the two-state solution isn't the solution. What are you proposing? Nice talk, or maybe not, but what are you proposing? What's your solution? Nice, it's easy to criticize, isn't it? What's your solution? See, one of the solutions that I have always heard of is that we should donate money to this particular cause. Now, I am not against that. We should donate money, because in that particular land, people are being starved. people are in need of medical attention and people need to build their homes. So in that regard, we should donate money. But there's a mindset we need to, and I use my words carefully, we need to be careful that we don't fall into. This is the issue. We need to be careful that we don't fall into the mindset that when I donate the money, I've done my job. No, that's the beginning of your job. You've done something, but don't let you be fooled and think, I've done it. I've done everything I can do. That's all I can do. That is the solution. This is all I'm going to do. Because keep in mind that in that particular land, people are not just starving out of natural causes. They're being starved because of the boycott, which is being used by Israel, where they've put warships on the coastal side of Gaza and they've built a barrier around Gaza. So anything that goes in, that comes out, they dictate. So they're being starved. Medical attention, so they don't have doctors in that particular land. They have doctors, but unfortunately they can't get the medical equipment because Israeli soldiers and checkpoints won't allow it in. So again, you fall into that same thing. But we should, and I emphasize should, we should give money to that particular cause because the people are in need of the money. They need to build their homes. They need a roof to live under. They need to feed their children. They need to clothe their children. And money can buy those things. But we should never let it breed in us a mentality of, I've done my job. Unless the occupation is removed, your job is not finished. That's the beginning of your job. So what is the solution to Palestine? What is it that we can do for that particular land? If you look across the Muslim world, and I haven't talked about this on purpose because I want to bring it in now, you find that Israel is surrounded by Muslim mass populated countries. Muslim mass populated countries. You find that it's surrounded by these. It's surrounded by Muslim countries which have an army, which have resources. Even by the nature of the fact that you don't even need to fight in Israel. It's not an issue of fighting. What's the issue here? The issue here is that you can just boycott Israel out if the Muslim rulers wanted to. But there's no emphasis from their behalf. There's no care from their behalf. Why do we know this? If we look across our history, you will find that each one has betrayed the cause of Palestine. Started with Anwar Sadat in about 1975, for which later on he said, they claimed that he got assassinated for. Then you had the Jordanians sign the treaty with Israel. Now you've got all of the Arab countries lining up. All of the Muslims saying, yes, let's all be happy with Israel. It's okay, let's all fall for this two-state solution. But just by virtue of that, you could stop Israel from massacring the Muslims in Palestine. But in reality, what you need is an Islamic leadership that cares for its own people. And that is the thing you don't have in any of the Muslim countries, actually. An Islamic leader that actually cares not for Saudis, for Pakistanis, for Bangladeshis, for Muslims. That cares about the rights of the Muslims, wherever they happen to be in the world. That cares about the obligation it has towards Muslims. That cares about helping the Muslims in each of these countries. And you can expand that to other issues, whether it's Kashmir, whether it's Chechnya, etc., etc. But that's what you don't have. You don't have a land, a leadership that cares for the Muslims. You don't even have that cares for its own national people. And that is the obstacle for us at the moment. So why is it that with all the abundance of resources in the Muslim world, you can't get electricity, for example, in Bangladesh for 1 hour, but you can get electricity here for 24 hours and they ain't got nothing under their country? Why is it that with all the gases, all the minerals in this particular land, that our countries are backward? That they can't stop the massacring of the Muslims? That they can't help the Palestinians? On the contrary, they all seem to fall for the same thing of, let's take this two-state solution. Let us all be a part of the two-state solution. It's okay, we'll have Israel and we'll have Palestine. So this is the thing that we should be thinking about. How can I put my efforts into that? Well, we can have a sincere leadership in the Muslim world that cares about the affairs of our own people according to Islam. That wants to look after our own people according to Islam. That wants to look after Masjid al-Aqsa, where they're not building tunnels underneath it, hoping that it collapses. That will have Masjid al-Aqsa to think that we want Muslims to be able to make pilgrimage there, i.e. to go and visit that particular land. They won't need a passport, they won't need all of these things, because it is Muslim land. See, I want to finish, I started with the verse, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa. I started with that particular verse, and I did that on purpose. Because when you listen, and I've unfortunately, in one sense, had the last week while preparing for this, had to see all of the facts and figures, and what I thought was bad, it was even worse than I thought. But that particular verse reminded me, because I knew the verse in one sense very well when I was reading the tafsir. It reminded me of something. This particular verse came at a very particular time in the Prophet ﷺ's life. Anybody who's read the seerah will know that the 10th year of the hijrah, or the 10th year of the prophethood, i.e. the year of sorrow, was one of the worst times for the Prophet ﷺ. In this particular time, Abu Talib, who was his guardian, passed away. So the protection he got from Abu Talib was no longer there. On top of this, back on the same year, about 6 months later, Khadija radiallahu anha died, passed away. So his wife passed away. So he lost his tribal protection, and he lost the comfort at his house, the one who would help him, the one who would protect him, when he found it very difficult outside talking to the Meccans and the Quraysh. That same year, the Prophet ﷺ went to Taif, and we know the story of Taif. The Prophet ﷺ got stoned. He was stoned so badly that the sandal stuck to his feet with a layer of blood. But even Jibreel alayhi salam came to him and said, if you want, I'll collapse both the mountains over them. And the Prophet said, no, maybe their children will later become Muslim. It's fine. That is the year that Allah revealed that particular verse, after Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. Notice in the verse something. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ is in Mecca. That's his first visit to Al-Aqsa. But it mentions Masjid Al-Aqsa. But we know the first mosque built was in Qiblah, and the second mosque was in Medina. So what mosque in Aqsa? There is no mosque in Aqsa. So why does Allah use the word Masjid Al-Aqsa? There is no mosque in Al-Aqsa at this time. At that time, the Prophet's time, that particular land, I think, is looked after by the Romans. The mosque later is opened by whom? Umar ibn al-Khattab. He goes and opens the mosque there. He cleans out the den and opens this particular. So why does Allah mention that? Because Allah wants to give comfort to the Muslims. Wants to give comfort to the Prophet. That look, you who at this particular time cannot even get Islam out of Mecca. You cannot even get Islam out of Mecca. There will one day come a time where you will get Islam not just in Mecca, but in Medina and in Al-Aqsa. That's how far this deen will spread. And you will establish a masjid there, and it will be prayed in. Because the mosque is the sign of Islam. Nobody else has a mosque. I.e. motivating the Prophet ﷺ that one day your deen will reach so far after these dark days that you will be secure. We should think for us of Palestine like that. That one day we want to be able to pray in that mosque. Now we cannot see it. Now we cannot imagine it because of the darkness of our days. And it seems that each day gets darker. But one day we want to be able to go to Masjid Al-Aqsa and pray in that particular land. That we want it to be under the leadership of Muslims who care for that particular land, who wish to liberate that particular land. Not with this two-state solution of Israel and Palestine and let's all live side by side. No, with no Israel, no occupation at all. And that's difficult to say in this particular climate, but no occupation, because that's what Israel is, a big occupation from 1947 and nothing else. There is no legitimacy for Israel at all. We don't recognize Israel. And we should have the courage. Like I said, it's difficult to say. Here, maybe amongst Muslims, easy. At work, with non-Muslim colleagues, with friends. It's very difficult to say because they'll think, what are you talking about? What are you going to do? Wipe all these people out? No, we want to return justice for the Palestinians. That's the aim. And I want to end with the story of Umar ibn al-Khattab and what happened when he went to Palestine. Because this is what will happen if we don't accept the solution from Islam and we start taking solutions from the UN and the Americans and the British. When he went to Palestine on one particular visit, he went and found some of the Sahabas dressed very luxuriously. And they were wearing fine garments, and they had fine horses, and some of them lived in very fine houses in Palestine after the conquest of Palestine, of Al-Aqsa. and he looked at them, and Umar ibn al-Khattab, being Umar ibn al-Khattab, he first smacked them up. So he hit them a little bit around the head. And then he said what became later very, very famous, actually. He said, we are a people Allah gave honor through Islam. You are a people that Allah, us, gave honor through Islam. Your honor is Islam. Whenever we seek honor outside of Islam, whenever you go outside of Islam and seek honor from somebody else, whether it's the UN, whether it's the Americans, whether it's in the worldly matters of the world, in terms of luxurious clothes and houses and all of that sort of for comfort, Allah will misguide us. Allah will abandon us. That's what will happen. And we know the famous verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that, if paraphrasing it, if you do not obey Allah, Allah will remove you and bring another nation that obeys Allah and loves His Messenger and loves the solutions which Islam provides, and wipe you off the earth. And for Allah, that is very easy. He has wiped off many nations which have disobeyed Him. And this is the fundamental issue for us. This is why this is an Islamic issue. That it goes back to our creed. That we want Islam for that particular land, and we want Islam to become the beacon of that particular land. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that it will. One day this land will be liberated. The question is do we want to liberate it, or are we going to wait until Allah removes us and He brings a people who are better than us, who love Him more, and bring the victory through their hands to liberate this particular land? This is the thing that we need to reconcile amongst ourselves. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو التواب الرحيم.